I came to this country as an 8-year-old, and I graduated from high school 9 years later. Like many of our students, I was not ready to go away to school. We lived close to Miami-Dade North Campus at the time, so it seemed like the ideal choice for me. And I majored in theater and graduated from Miami-Dade College. And one of the most interesting things about being at North Campus was what a really interesting, supportive, and welcoming community our professors created that enabled us all to have a sense of belonging. So when I transferred to Florida State, yeah, that was not what it was like. And so what I ended up doing was minoring in theater and majoring in English. And what was interesting about being at FSU at that time was, again, that sense of community that was intrinsic part of being an English major. So officially, I became a poet at Florida State University. But I had a really interesting professor who was very well respected, and I was taking his poetry classes. And he redirected me to talk about what it was to be Cuban. So he, in a sense, gave me permission to tell those stories. So I would say that that was sort of the official starting point of me talking about all things Cuban through poetry. So after I got my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, I came back home to Miami. And I found that obviously I needed a job. My mother suggested that I apply to teach at Miami-Dade College, which is what I did. And I was hired right away. And I have been teaching there for 30 years. So once I started working at MDC, I wanted to be that kind of person, the kind of professor that those teachers that had really encouraged me, supported me, I wanted to be that person. So I generally tried to create activities, get my students engaged in things that would, in essence, create that same sense of community that would foster engagement. So when I taught creative writing, I wanted my students to write poetry, but I also wanted them to read poetry as well as to have an environment in which they could publicly share their work, and there was no such place. So the very successful Butterfly Lightning series is born from that class, right? This idea that I wanted my students to have the opportunities that I had, right? And so the series happened, much like The Alley in Tallahassee. The Butterfly Lightning series pulled in writers from across the community as well as from my classes. And I organized the series in conjunction with a student that I had at the time, Richard Blanco, who was most recently the inaugural poet. I have found that by my telling stories, people also have that opportunity to validate their own stories and enable them to know and understand that their stories are worth telling too.